podcast that I started 9 years ago, same way you guys did.
Wow.
100 episodes ago, whatever. So.
Oh crap, Jonathan! We got like 7 more years to go. Crap.
Then we could write a book.
That's a lot of beer.
So tell us about the book. I mean, so this is a project you've been working on for some time. Give us a little history there on the book. What kind of inspired you? I know obviously you started with a podcast and we've talked about that, but tell us a little bit, give us a summary of what this book's about. And some of the big lessons that you've learned along the way.
Well, I started the podcast, like I said, in 5 days, it'll be 9 years since we started doing the Shark Tank Fan podcast. And since then we've recapped episodes. We've had several entrepreneurs from the show. And I just interviewed 2 in the last 2 weeks. And then I've interviewed Barbara Corcoran. And I don't know if you remember Kevin Harrington from the first, he was in the first season and part of the season 2, interviewed him and just for the reasons I just mentioned. I love business. I'm in sales, I own businesses. I've done all this stuff and I thought it was exciting. I thought it was, they really kind of rebirthed the American dream in a lot of ways. Yeah. And what about 12 years ago, Jonathan, you and I talked about our relationship with Dan Miller. Yep. He started talking about coaching. I started doing some coaching 12 years ago. Yep. And got to meet Dan, get to know him. And it led me to meeting people like you. And just a number of my most precious friends are from that relationship by meeting Dan. And so it kind of morphed from doing some career coaching. I still do some life coaching, but sales and business coaching is what I kind of settled into. And that even got further niched down into a communication coaching. I really, I'm in my wheelhouse when I'm working with a leader or a business owner or a team about their communication. How, I use the DISC profiles. I talk about all that, but I love all types of communication from, physical, verbal, the personality concepts and all that. So I say all that to say that I started talking to these businesses and working with them and helping them work through the struggles they were having. And all of a sudden I started seeing this correlation between that and the Shark Tank. I'm saying they're having the same trouble that an entrepreneur that walks out on Shark Tank has when he doesn't get a deal. When they start firing questions off and they can't answer those questions, then in most cases they're not going to get a deal or it's not going to go well for them. And so I started looking at that. And at the same time, there was a business called Cousins Maine Lobster that got on the show, and they did a deal with Barbara Corcoran, and they had prepared answers to all the questions that had been asked. And they were really, really prepared in the negotiation part. And they did a deal with Barbara Corcoran, and they had only been in business 3 or 4 months, and nobody knew it because they were so polished and so prepared and so ready. So anyway, they did the deal, and it's been a successful business. They're doing millions and millions of dollars since Shark Tank. But what happened, I really wanted to write a book that would help people, that would really be a benefit. It's a big job, as you know. It is it's a task, and it's not something that you want to take time away from your family to do. If it's not going to be worthwhile, it's not going to be something that's going to benefit people. So I started believing that if I could correlate the Shark Tank TV show, the entertainment value of that, into something that would help people, it would be a good idea. So long story short, I took all the questions, all my seasons of doing the show. I started cataloging them, hundreds of questions on a Evernote. I started putting them in Evernote, just piling them in. And then I sat down and I started categorizing each question. I said, what is that really about? All right, let me ask you this, guys. What's the first question after the entrepreneur's through with the pitch? What's the first question Kevin O'Leary is going to ask them?
Any sales?
Have any sales?
What's your sales volume?
It's the most important question, because that tells people if it's viable. What are you laughing about?
No, I'm just laughing because I'm picturing, when you say that, I'm picturing the guys on the, when he asked that question and they're saying, well, $10,000. And he kind of was like, what, or something, small like that. He's always like,
he'll sell. He doesn't look, he just says it. He said, that's a nothing burger. What are you doing here? That's not a business. He just tells it right. So anyway, sales is the number one question. Well, I started finding out that a lot of the questions were being asked in a different way, but they all pertain to the sales component. So I put them in the same bucket, and I did the same thing with the other questions, and it ended up being really 7 major categories of questions that they ask. And here's the thing I learned when I first moved from my little rural home life in West Tennessee over to Nashville, to Williamson County. And I started getting around people that were successful. Mm-hmm. And I always heard that if you want to be in life where, somebody is, you need to do the things and say the things and act the way they act. Right.
Yep.
And so when it comes to seeing that you've got a panel of millionaires and billionaires that are asking questions about a business that they're going to pull the money out of their pocket to invest in, those questions must be really important. So let's think about those, and why should a business owner look at those questions? Well, it turns out that in the real world, the same questions pertain. The businesses that are failing for the exact same reasons people were not getting deals in Shark Tank. So I believe that if you can answer these 7 questions, you can survive in the real world and on Shark Tank if you ever get the opportunity. So that's the premise. That's the idea.
Okay.
Yeah,
let's go through some of the, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's talk. I think the sales question is a great one to start with. And I understand why the guys on Shark Tank and gals on Shark Tank ask that, because I think so many businesses, they skip sales when they're trying to start a business.
Yeah.
They think, oh, I got to get all this other stuff right. I got to get systems, or I got to get advertising, or whatever. And they don't realize.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that sales are proof of concept. They think sales are like come later after. I don't know what people are actually thinking.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Why do you think people want to avoid the sales part?
Well, it's the hardest. It's the most rejection. It's the one that kills the dream. If it doesn't sell, there's all kinds of, if I put on my coaching hat, I do some coaching as well. Like, it's definitely if there's no sales, then there's so much hope tied to the future sales that if they go out and start trying to sell, then it's like, ooh, and then they don't get them.
Reality sets in.
Yeah. It's that rejection.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just don't know that's the first step, or the best, the fastest way to get to product viability.
Or they have
an idea and they just want to, they believe it's good.
Right.
And they've been told business wise from bad coaching, probably from a lot of marketing gurus, that you got to start with all this other fancy, the social media, and you got to do all this and this and this and this, everything except getting out there and talking to people, So that's like the most important thing.
Well, it's interesting that if it was just one question, if it was just sales, then the book would have had the question you must answer.
Yeah.
It would, but see, the thing is, I found out that you're right. If you're talking about that specific type of person, the sales is the problem. And it's the person usually that says, I've got to get everything perfect before I start.
Yeah.
I got to get everything ready. I've got to get it, I got to get the website right. I got to get my business cards. I got to get all this infrastructure in place. And, you've seen businesses on Shark Tank. They have the manufacturing and stuff in place. They have all kinds of things. They have their garage full of these items, and they've never sold it. And it's the personality of that person to think that I got to get all this in order. And it is the fear of having to sell. So that's one personality. All right. Then you've got the other guy who is going out and selling everything, and he doesn't know how much anything costs. He doesn't know what his pricing is. He's not making any money, and he's selling stuff. I literally had a client 2 years ago that was a very successful 7-figure pool business. He built high-end pools for people. Okay. When I say high-end, they start at 75 and they go to 200. Okay. All right. And very successful at it. Was the living off referrals. He was such a good salesperson. But when I sat down with him and I said, what's going on? He goes, I'm not making any money, and I'm not saving any money, and I'm worried about retirement, and I'm worried about these things. I said, well, let's look at your money. Well, he was really great at selling it, but he didn't know where any of the money was going. He had no idea what the materials was costing. But all he knew was at the end of the day, I'm working myself to death and I'm not making any money. That's the opposite guy, right? He's a great salesperson, but he's not taking care of the books. And I got to tell you, it's really interesting how many people avoid the accounting part of their business because it's just so much, it takes so much time, and they're trying to work in that whirlwind of keeping the business going. If they're in an active growing business. So,
and it is a different personality. A sales personality is different than an accounting personality. Thank God. So like, but you do have to either develop those skills or hire somebody pretty quick to help you.
Us salespeople, we'll just go out and kill it and drag it home and we'll make another sale, Yeah,
we'll let somebody else process it and figure out how to deliver it and turn it into burger, right?
Right.
That's right.
We can sell it. We can absolutely sell it.
But
I totally get that.
If you're familiar with the show, you've seen people on there that they'll say, you're an inventor. You need to keep inventing, and we need to build an infrastructure to support you in your inventions. You need to stay out of the other stuff. And so it's different with every person. If you're a great salesperson, you need to have somebody running the business so you can be out selling. And it all comes down to, do you know yourself, which is an important component. And it's a question that's in the book.
Right.
And so, you got to take every scenario is different. Not every situation's the same. You can't write a manual and say, if you follow this to the T, it's all going to work, because we're not sure, what your skill's going to be and what your strength's going to be. So
that's why most companies have, a CEO, a CMO, a CFO, because those are all very different skill sets. Financial officer is very different than a marketing officer, very different than the guy who casts the vision as the CEO. Like they're all very different, roles inside of the company. Now, obviously, when you're starting up, you kind of have to play all those, but as quickly as you can, you got to figure out which one you are and then move on.
You guys heard of Aaron Krause, the Scrub Daddy guy?
Yeah.
He's just on 2020, a couple of weeks ago, they claim that he has lost his throne of being number one, but it's real close with Bomba Socks as being the number one Shark Tank business ever. And he is approaching 270 million in sales.
Wow.
Since he came out of Shark Tank, he's moved into an 80,000 square foot building. He is debt free. His only investor is Lori Grenier. He has no other investors. He's not public. He's a privately held company. And I don't know if he gave her 15 or 20%, but that's the only dividends he pays every year. And he's got a debt free company with 100 employees, and he's pumping out these sponges to every major retail in the country and then around the world. He's got manufacturing in Europe, and he's shipping these sponges all over the country. I think he sold 25 to 30 million sponges. Okay. Smart guy. But listen to this. He's in the book, by the way. He and I did a Q&A on trademarks and patents. And I was catching up with him to do a little bonus video for the book promotion.
Sure.
And he told me that he just a year ago hired a CFO. I mean, he is over 200 million in sales when he did that.
Wow.
And he said, I should have hired him 3 years ago. And so is there ever a time when you're there, when you've arrived? It's an evolution. It's a constant growing.
Yeah.
Jonathan, we're not the same guys we were when we met. So we've learned so much, and we're better at what we do. We understand things more. We're more clear about who we are and what we're good at and what we need to be spending time doing. Right. I mean, I'm sure you're the same way, Sean. I mean, you know exactly what you're good at. And the more, the quicker you learn that, and the sooner you can delegate those other things, the better off you're going to be.
Wow. All right. Let's, what's some other questions that need to be asked?
Well,
going through this,
when it comes to the sales question, obviously that's the main question. Do you have any sales? And we talked about the viability of that. And so, there's some other questions involved in that, and as far as pricing and the other things that go along with that. The question number 2, which I believe is the second most asked question, is where did you come up with that valuation? All right. Because every business owner that comes out there, they say, I want, I'd like to, get $250,000 for 5% of my company. All right. And so all of a sudden they've just said that their company is worth several $1 million. And so Kevin O'Leary says, well, that kind of valuation, you must have a lot of sales. Right. And so the valuation, the reason that I put that question in there, it's such a big question that gets asked in every show. And for some guys, it doesn't matter. But if you ever want to sell your business, or if you ever, the more you understand about how your business is valued, the better off you're going to be growing that business and getting it prepared for selling, just like Michael Gerber said in the E-Myth. And so a real life scenario, I wrote the story in the book about Jody Norcio, who started Eco Diva. She sat down with me I said, what do you want to accomplish with this coaching? She said, I want to sell this business. I want to grow it and sell it. That's okay. I said, all right, let's see what we can do. Well, she was one of those people that was doing every single thing the business required. She had a line of sunscreen, doggy shampoo, and bug screen. She was mixing the stuff in her basement at night. She was going to farmers markets and Kroger stores, and she was selling this stuff. And then she had a website, and then she was doing all the fulfillment, and then she was doing all the books, but she didn't know how much money she was making. She was in 44 Kroger stores, and she had no idea how much profit she was making.
Because she was running around like crazy. I mean, she didn't have time to even think about, probably. I mean, she's doing everything.
Well, what's interesting about that, Jonathan, is that after we started building the business and it started getting really clear what she should be doing.
Yeah.
She actually called me one day. She goes, I'm actually loving this business again. And there was a sense that she might want us to keep it, but then the hours she was keeping was making her sick. And she was physically starting to break down. And so she said, I've got a year. I've got to get this business sold. I've got to get on. I've got to do something different. And what was the worst part about it was that she was not willing to let go of certain things. She felt like she was the only person that could do it this way.
Yeah.
And she was afraid that the product wouldn't be as good as it should be when she got it out. So, but we had to come up with a valuation. What's it worth? You know, is it a business that has real estate or has inventory or are you just selling an idea that has a customer base? That's a whole different concept. So I thought we ought to address the valuation, because you really you have to know what the business is worth before you can decide to sell it. And a lot of people get stuck there, in that question, and they really don't think that through before they go out there, because there's been people walk out of the Shark Tank. They asked for too much. The valuation was too high for the sharks to be able to come along.
Sure.
And so they hurt themselves in the process. So,
it's interesting, Piers. I work with a company, capitalism.com, and we teach e-commerce people how to build a 7-figure brand and get it ready for like an 8-figure exit. A lot of physical products like you see on Shark Tank, that kind of stuff. And one thing we tell students all the time is, if for a brand to be sellable, it's also keepable, right? Like, if it's worth selling, it's also worth keeping, and vice versa. What she had, the lady you're talking about, your client, like, she had a problem that nobody wants to buy your problems.
That's right.
Like, nobody wants to buy what she was doing. Like that. That's like,
and also
that'd be like slavery. I mean, why would you like buying yourself into indentured servanthood?
That's like buying a Subway franchise, right?
Yeah,
exactly. So that's a great response, because the thing she had to look at was, what am I going to show somebody that's worth buying?
Mm-hmm.
She couldn't show the profit. She couldn't show the growth. She didn't. So we got her hooked up with a lady who sat down, and man, she's a great bookkeeper, and she got everything straightened out, was giving her real clean, nice reports. And when she got all that straight last year, there's a certain part of the book where I just mentioned that she just emailed me and said, or texted me and said, I just signed the contract to sell my business. And
nice.
I was with her all the way up till the end of that. But she finally got control of everything, understood what everything, was worth, and she made it happen. And so it was a really fun experience, but it was painful. Mm-hmm. And I had to be pretty direct at some time.
I bet.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Anyway,
we're seeing that right now. some of our students over at capitalism.com is a lot of them started out on Amazon and selling on Amazon, because it's a great traffic source, millions of people buying. But then when this whole virus hit and Amazon stopped accepting shipments for, fulfillment and things like that, like all of a sudden they realized their business was broken and they didn't even know it because they only had one sales channel.
Yeah.
And they only had one supplier and they only had one of this. So they had a very, like, anything went wrong and their whole business just collapsed. And so they all are learning that lesson right now. So we're kind of coaching them through that at the moment as well. Like, you don't have a business yet, because if you can't withstand one little thing, and granted, this was a big deal, like this whole pandemic, nobody saw coming, but we're coaching them right now that, like, this is an opportunity to shore up those weaknesses of
absolutely
of not having any redundancy whatsoever. Not having multiple sales channels, not controlling your email list, not controlling, all kinds of things. So I think that's one of the great things that's going to come out of this whole pandemic that we're in right now is a lot of businesses, if they're open to it, are going to learn where their business is weak and they've got an opportunity to make it stronger. And I think these questions are great in your book, or I'm looking at the table of contents right now, is like on Amazon, like, these are great questions to shore up your business in this time.
Yeah. One of the things that we're going to talk about in a moment, and we've already touched on it a lot, but one of the first things that I asked a lady that I know that owns a business, we do business with her. I said, "How much running room do you have? How long can you go before you hit the point where you're not going to be able to support yourself in the business?"
Yeah.
And most people, don't listen to Dave Ramsey, and they don't have an emergency fund.
Yeah, right.
They don't have running room at all. They don't have a contingency plan, which I think is what's going to happen. And people are going to start saying, what if this happens again? What are we going to do to be ready so that we can sustain how many months that this happens? It's difficult for some people. Some people are living month to month and, thin margins in restaurant businesses and that sort of thing. But at the same time, I think they're going to look at their business a little bit differently. And they're going to look at it more like a shark would, because the more problems you have, the less interested they are in investing. So
right.
it's a good way to evaluate through these questions. The next one is, how did you finance your business? And they want to know, where did you get the money to start your business? And what are you going to do with the money I'm going to give you? So it's a twofold question, but the question is, if the guy says, well, I bootstrapped this business for $700 and I've grown it into a $85,000 company and I made $50,000 last year. That's more attractive than a business that's $3 million in gross sales and has $1.2 million in debt.
Right.
Okay. You get the perspective. That's a lot more attractive to have a debt-free bootstrap company than to have something big that's going to have a lot of debt. And maybe they've borrowed money from everybody they know, including they've invited 3 investors to come in, and they only own 25% now.
Yeah.
I'm kind of rolling all that up in a ball, but that's the question. That's what comes out. That's when a lot of times it falls apart for an entrepreneur, when he gets to that point where he's having to say, what about the money? What about the money for this business? Where did you get it? Kent Julian from Georgia wrote a chapter. He bootstrapped his company and built it debt free. And he's a speaker and he's a teacher, does a lot of different things. But he talks about the fact of how important it is to borrow as little money as possible and use as much cash as you can to grow your company. I know there's some businesses that require, a lot more capital. I get it. But the closer you can get to, being bootstrapped, the better you are. I liked the article in Success Magazine. Barbara Corcoran said that she's got a wall in her office that every business that's failed that she's invested in, she turns them upside down.
That's great.
All right. And so the funny thing is, she pointed at those businesses. She said, you see all those that are upside down? She said, they're the ones that spent the investment as soon as I gave it to them. All these other people, they held on to that money and they didn't spend it until they absolutely needed it. It was just, in that one concept of difference of saying, as soon as I get my hands on the money, it just goes right through my fingers. It's another deal. So it's important to talk about, where'd you get the money, and how are you gonna do that? Damon John wrote a book about it too, so it works great. The next question is, do you want or need a partner? One of the first stories in the book is a company here in Nashville called Moosehead Kettle Corn.
Mm-hmm.
I got a call from this guy a few years ago, and I think he reached out to me on email because that's what I was giving out for the podcast. And I called him, and he said, I really need to meet with you. So it's important. I said, okay. So I met him up in Nashville, and we went and sat down and had some coffee. And he said, our friends dared us to send an application to Shark Tank. Then they make kettle corn for the Tennessee Titans football games, the Ryman Auditorium, the Country Music Hall of Fame, all that stuff. They're farmers markets. They're big all around here. And they were a debt-free company producing volume in the six figures. And it's a family run business. They were having the time of their life. And so I said, well, you guys ought to be on Shark Tank. And they just said, oh, yeah, we'd never get on that. They applied. They got the phone call. And then after they interviewed the wife, they sent them a contract, certified mail, just fill out the contract. And they were going to come and send a video crew to Nashville to video these people and put them on Shark Tank. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden it got down to the nitty gritty. Okay, what are we going to do with this? Do we really want a shark? Do we need one? Do we want to scale this business nationwide? Do we want to have somebody else telling us what they do, what to do because they own a part of our business? They were scared to death. And I said, you don't have to do it. I said, if it doesn't fit your model and it's not going to benefit you, why would you do that to yourself? Why would you, if you're happy with the way your business is going, then leave it as is. And they turned it down. They didn't go. And that seems ridiculous to somebody. Why wouldn't you be on Shark Tank if you could be in front of 8 or 10 million people and do it? They chose the best thing that was good for their business, their profitability, and to help them enjoy the business they wanted to build. So there you go.
Love that. I mean, I know when I had my handyman business a while back when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, like I started a handyman business, and it got to a point where I had to decide, am I going to start hiring extra help? I mean, I was making a decent living, but I could expand. I could have bought trucks. Because there's huge demand. And I had to make that same decision. I was like, okay, do I just want to make a good living for my family, control my own time? Mm-hmm. Or do I want to start adding complexity and all the stuff that goes along with that? And that's a great question, because at the end of the day, I mean, unless you're going for a big exit or something like that, I mean, the standard of living is not that much difference, with a $10 million business or $1 million business, or even for that matter, 6-figure business. Like, you kind of live the same life. One might have a little more complications, but at the end of the day, I mean, maybe your house is a little nicer, maybe not. Maybe you drive a little nicer car, maybe not. So yeah, I think that's a great question.
You guys, you probably know the trouble that can come with a partner, especially if it's a relative or a close friend. Things can go bad, right? So
what's that quote by Dave Ramsey? He says the only ship that doesn't sail is a partnership.
That's it. So everybody knows the fear of that and how it can ruin a friendship, it can ruin relationship or whatever.
Yeah.
But so you got to ask yourself, do I need a partner? And do I want one? And what value do they bring? Is it something that I could sub out? Could we make some kind of external agreement that doesn't connect us and all of our property together? And so the first part of the question is, do I want a partner or do I need one? And the second part is, would I make a good partner?
Right.
That's when you have to ask yourself the questions about, what do you bring to the table and what do you not have that you need?
That's a soul searching question right there. That's a little, that's tough. Like, am I a good partner? I mean, that's a good question for sure.
Well, we're getting short on time, Pierce. I do want to hit. There's one question I want you to touch on, and I'm going to jump ahead to question 6. Is your product a company? Is your product or company a brand?
Yes.
That's a big question because you got to, in terms of evaluating, your company and what it means or the value that you offer. Flesh out that a little more on that question in terms of brand, company. Do people recognize you?
Well, here's the thing. We know most of us know what a brand is.
Yep.
We could recognize the Coca-Cola logo or the, just think of all the different emblems or, the thing that's on your hat there, the Tennessee state flag, and there's all these things that are images that you recognize that are part of the brand of a company. And then when you just to mention Coca-Cola, as a brand, you recognize their colors, their logo, and you know what they stand for. You can quote things that they say about their product or whatever. It's one of those things, but it's hard to identify what a brand is in most cases. And it's also especially hard to say, is my company a brand? Yeah. And in a lot of businesses, entrepreneurs, they'll come on Shark Tank. I'm building a brand here. I'm building a brand.
Right.
And I'm thinking, do you know what that is? Do you know what that means? And so for me, that's not my expertise. It's not a branding, but Jimmy Gibson. Do you remember Jimmy? Jonathan, do you remember Jimmy?
That name sounds so familiar, but no, I can't place it.
He and I became great friends when I was out at Kevin Miller's place in Colorado speaking. Jimmy was a speaker there as well. He's a marketing and branding guru, man. He calls himself the branding magician. He's been a magician since he was a little boy. He does performances. He performed at MGM. He's an incredible guy, but he's got this way to make something that's so complicated become very simple with an image. And he's just got this creative way of creating a brand, and a brand is very personal. The funny thing when you look at the book, the first thing he mentions is the ranchers. They brand their cattle. And what are they doing? They say, when you see that emblem, that they belong to me, right? It's a brand. And so it's about product recognition, but it also has, instead of it just being recognizable, it's going deeper into what that company stands for and what they believe in and what they're trying to do for you in a lot of cases. Sure. And so what Jimmy did for me is he wrote a chapter to take people through that process of how to think about what your brand is, because I don't believe people really know. And he's got some great exercises on how you can start to create your own brand. And he put those in the book, and he's got, and he's got some links to go to his site, and you can go through some exercises. But it's a great question, Jonathan. It's one that I'm not qualified to answer, but the book will make a lot more sense in that chapter. But everybody dreams of having that product recognition of everybody knowing what it is. And it's just very difficult to get there if you don't have some help. Sure. That's my opinion. I don't think it's something you can necessarily do on your own without some help.
Right. Absolutely. So.
I agree. We, one of our past guests, Dr. Michelle Mazur, she has this thing called the 3-word rebellion, which is kind of like how you summarize your cause and your brand, like in 3 to 5 words or so. And that was, that fits hand in hand with this, like, because it's not just a logo. It's what does the logo stand for? Mm-hmm. Right. What's the depth behind it? And I don't know if you've read Simon Sinek's new book, The Infinite Game, but it's, it kind of gets into kind of the deeper meaning of what you're up to and what you're about. And the deeper you could go in that, and not every brand needs to do that, but when you can, it just adds so much power to your marketing and the ability to persuade customers to do business with you and all that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, man, this has been fantastic, Pierce. We appreciate you coming on. I wish we had more time, but we've got a hard stop coming up, and I want to let people know, people that are listening, what's the best way people can get a copy of your book, Could You Survive Shark Tank?
Yeah, man, they could. It's on Amazon, and but the easiest thing to do would be go to sharktankbook.com, and
Okay.
there's a link right there in the middle of the page. Click to buy the book, and it'll take you straight to Amazon, where you
Cool.
can buy it in Kindle or print version. And if you'll send your receipt to sharktankbook@gmail.com, I'll link you into all the bonuses with some of these extra videos with people like Aaron Krause from Scrub Daddy and
Awesome.
and the Jimmy Gibson that I was talking about with the branding. I've got a lot of extra stuff that I'm adding to the bonus list here that'll help people answer these questions and move forward in their business. That's my goal.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
It's been a pleasure having you on. Oh, by the way, we did have Kent. Kent was on our show. It's been several months back, but we had Kent Julian on. He was great too.
He's a solid guy, man.
Solid guy. Yeah. I love Kent, but, man, I'd love to do this again. We'd love to have you back on, but, until then, I hope you have a great, hope you and your family have a great weekend and, thoughts and prayers for everybody out there during this time. It's crazy, turbulent times we're in, but, we'll all get through it for sure.
Well, Ben, I really thank you guys it's an honor to hang out with you. It went by way too fast.
Yep.
And
always does.
And I apologize if I talk too much, but
I love it. I love listening to you, man. So we'll definitely have you back on again soon, but thanks a lot, man. And hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you so much.
Good stuff. Thanks, Pierce. We got to run. We got to jump on another interview, but I'll be reaching out to you for sure.
Sorry to go long, guys. Really.
No, you're fine.
Good. And I want to catch up with you too, Piers, and just kind of learn more about you, meet you a little bit. So I think we probably have some friends in common as well.
Well, I come to Knoxville all the time, Jonathan. We need to meet up.
Let me know, man. We'll when things go back to normal, we'll certainly get a beer. Or
you're allowed to leave your house, right?
That's right.
Sean, do you know how to reach? Let him know how to reach me. We'll get together.
Yeah,
we can talk anytime. Okay.
All right. Sounds good.
Thanks, Pierce.
Thank you.
Take care.
Appreciate it.
All right. So we'll jump on and get on the next Zoom link.
All right.
All right.
I'll
Thanks.
see you over there.